Headline hit like a lightning bolt. Breaking: the Federal Reserve just bought 5 billion XRP. Screenshots flooded social media. Red arrows pointed to blurry documents. Influencers spoke in hushed, urgent tones, saying this was the end of the dollar and the beginning of a new financial order. And let's be honest, if that headline were true, it wouldn't just be crypto news, it would be the biggest financial event in modern history. So instead of reacting emotionally, today we're doing something most people won't do. We're slowing this down. We're dissecting where this narrative came from, why it spread so fast, and why millions of intelligent people immediately believed it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Even though the headline itself is false, the conditions that make it believable are very real. To understand why, you need to understand how modern finance actually works. Not how it's presented on CNBC, not how it's explained in textbooks, but how value actually moves behind the scenes. Most people assume money moves instantly because their banking app updates instantly. That's an illusion. In reality, global money moves slowly, expensively, and through a tangled web of intermediaries. Trillions of dollars sit idle every single day, just waiting to be used as collateral so that other money can move. This is where the phrase that started everything comes in: bridging asset. You've probably seen it buried inside BIS reports, IMF white papers, or central bank research documents. It sounds harmless, technical, boring, but it's one of the most revealing phrases in modern finance. When institutions talk about a bridging asset, they are admitting something profound: that national currencies cannot efficiently interact with each other without an intermediary layer. Now here's where narratives start to bend. Some crypto influencers took that phrase and jumped straight to the conclusion that central banks must therefore be buying XRP. That leap is where misinformation enters, but dismissing the entire discussion as nonsense is just as dangerous. Because central banks are very clearly exploring systems where liquidity is not held, but accessed on demand, and you know that changes everything. Think about this for a moment. If you are a central bank or a major financial institution, holding liquidity in every foreign currency you might need is incredibly expensive. It's capital inefficient, it ties up balance sheets, it increases risk. So what if instead of holding all that liquidity, you could access it instantly when needed? What if settlement could occur in seconds instead of days, without pre-funding accounts all over the world? That's not a crypto fantasy. That's an explicit goal stated repeatedly in official financial documents, and that's why assets designed specifically for settlement, not speculation, keep appearing in research, pilots, and sandbox environments. Not because governments are secretly buying them, but because they solve a real structural problem. So this is where XRP enters the conversation, not as a guaranteed winner, not as a promised investment, but really as a case study. XRP was designed from the beginning as a settlement-focused digital asset. Fast finality, low fees, neutral design. Whether you love it or hate it, that design choice is exactly why it keeps coming up in institutional discussions, and honestly, that's also why it's constantly misunderstood. Here's the key distinction most people miss. Using a network does not require owning the asset in the way retail investors think about ownership. Institutions can access liquidity through market makers, through intermediaries, through contracts, and through on-demand systems without ever issuing a press release that says we bought X tokens. This is how narratives get distorted. Silence gets interpreted as secrecy, complexity gets interpreted as conspiracy. Now let's talk about the domino effect argument. The idea that if one major institution adopts a system, everyone else is forced to follow. This idea isn't entirely wrong, but it's often exaggerated. Finance is competitive, but it's also conservative. Institutions don't move because of hype. They move because not moving becomes riskier than moving. That's why adoption happens slowly, quietly, and unevenly. And by the time it's obvious to the public, the system has already been operating in the background for years. So this is where those world map animations with XRP logos spreading everywhere come from. They're, visually powerful, emotionally persuasive, and honestly usually misleading. What's actually happening is way less cinematic. We're talking about trials, pilots, limited corridors, regulatory reviews, technical failures, and just incremental progress. It really doesn't look like a revolution. It looks like, well, bureaucracy. And that's exactly why people don't pay attention to it until a viral headline suddenly forces them to. Now let's address the part everyone really cares about: price. The infamous $1,000 XRP calculation. This is where, honestly, math gets abused more than anywhere else in crypto. People take global money supply numbers, divide them by token supply, and just declare destiny. Most of these calculations ignore velocity, ignore market structure, ignore liquidity constraints, and frankly, ignore reality. They're not predictions, they're attention devices. But here's where things get uncomfortable again. Even though most price math is nonsense, the scale of global settlement flows is, well, not. Cross-border payments, trade finance, derivative settlement, and liquidity provisioning operate at levels most retail investors can't even really conceptualize. If even a fraction of those flows were mediated differently in the future, it would change how certain assets are valued. Not guaranteed, not promised. But plausible. This is where influencers pivot into urgency. They say things like, "They haven't announced it yet, this is the quiet phase," or "smart money is loading." That language is designed to trigger fear of missing out. But here's the more sober reality. Markets often reprice before narratives are widely understood, not because of secret knowledge, but because incentives change before explanations do. That's not manipulation, it's structure. So let's ground ourselves again. The Federal Reserve did not buy 5 billion XRP. There is no official confirmation of any central bank purchasing XRP as a reserve asset. Anyone claiming that outright is misleading you. But the reason this story spread like wildfire is because trust in the existing system is fragile. People expect cracks, they expect pivots, they expect something to break. And when a narrative appears that seems to explain everything in one dramatic moment, it feels emotionally true, even if it's factually wrong. The real story here isn't about XRP specifically, it's about how the global financial system is struggling to modernize without destabilizing itself. It's about how slow, opaque institutions collide with fast, transparent technologies. It's about how information gaps get filled by speculation when communication fails. And it's about you, trying to navigate a landscape where every headline screams urgency, every influencer claims certainty, and every asset is framed as once in a lifetime. The danger isn't missing a moonshot. The danger is letting emotion replace understanding. If something truly transformative happens in global finance, it won't look like a YouTube thumbnail. It will look boring. It will be written in regulatory language. It will be tested, delayed, revised, and quietly implemented. And by the time it's undeniable, it will already be priced in. So the real question you should be asking isn't, did the Fed buy XRP? It's, why did that headline feel so believable? What does that say about confidence in the dollar, about transparency in institutions, about the hunger for alternatives? Because those questions matter far more than any single asset price prediction. If you've stayed with me this far, you already understand more than most people reacting emotionally online. And if this breakdown helped you cut through the noise, support the channel by liking the video. It tells the algorithm that nuance matters. Comment CBDC if you want a deep dive into